Let's play Burlington's Guess That Price. Back to school means back to saving. We're bringing you kids' jeans starting at, hold on a minute, just $11.99. Burlington's acing this test. What about character backpacks? We've got them starting at $12.99. Burlington's done it again. How about sneakers for the kids? A-plus brands and right on trend starting at $11.99. Saving is now in session. Burlington, deals, brands, wow! Styles and selections vary by location.
This season, the game begins before the games begin. On August 26th, it's FanDuel Futures Day. 24 hours of deals on all your football season predictions. Futures Day is coming. Visit the FanDuel app to learn more and get your picks ready now. FanDuel, play your game. 21 plus and present in select states. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER.
Hello, everybody. I'm Therese Bottomley, editor of the Oregonian and OregonLive. This is Beat Check with the Oregonian. Today, I'm talking to Samantha Swindler about her recent 12-part series about a missing crow. Yes, you heard that right. Cosmo the talking crow went missing, and Sam was there to tell us all about it. Sam, welcome back to Beat Check.
Thanks. It's good to talk with you.
So let's go back to the beginning of this strange and fascinating story. Tell us how you got started on the story of this crow who was basically adopted by a Southern Oregon family. He was both endeared and reviled in a small town, and then he mysteriously went missing, not once, but twice.
Yeah, that's kind of the story. In December 2021, reporter Lizzie Acker wrote a story for us about how a crow had flown inside of a school in Grants Pass and started talking and swearing and eating snacks and like chasing the kids around the playground and wouldn't leave. And the cops were called and they couldn't catch him. And the next day, the crow's owner came to pick him up and take him back to his home, which was in Williams, Oregon. And the story ran on local TV news, and we picked it up as one of those little oddball news items. And after the story ran, I called the crow's owner, Janelle, to see if she could share some video of the bird talking. The bird's name is Cosmo. But when I called her, Janelle was very distraught, and she said Cosmo was missing, and she believed he'd been murdered. Or killed, I guess is the correct word, because this is not a crime. So I set about trying to figure out if that could possibly be true, and why would anyone want to kill a talking crow, and ultimately tried to determine what happened to Cosmo.
And did Cosmo really talk, or were people kind of imagining actual words?
I think so much of this is about perception, including whether or not Cosmo was talking. But crows do mimic human sounds, and they're very smart. So it's very possible that you can train a crow to mimic words. And some people thought Cosmo was using profane words. Some people think Cosmo was saying the name of one of Janelle's dogs, whose name is Truck.
All right.
So you can imagine what the profane word is based on.
Yes. Okay. Got it. So, it sounds like a very intriguing story, but what motivated you to drive hours and hours to go down there to check it out?
It was how passionate everyone was that I spoke to. Janelle thought the neighbors had done something to Cosmo. And so the first neighbor that I talked to was so upset. She hung up on me, and then she called me back, and she was on the verge of tears, because it turns out that Cosmo had been attacking her kids for months outside of their house. They wouldn't leave the house without wearing a bicycle helmet. And so in the face of it, this whole thing is just ridiculous, which I am drawn to. The idea that this viral crow everybody loved might actually be a menace, a milkshake duck crow, if you will. And it was also just this little mystery that I think kind of gets at our relationship with wildlife and our relationship with our neighbors. My favorite genre of story is high drama, low stakes. And this had that.
Certainly qualified.
Yeah. And plus, every middle-aged white lady, I do love true crime, but it is kind of icky to sort of revel in murder, and that's the way you get your entertainment. And so this had the intrigue of true crime without any of the guilt, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the that image of kids out playing in this beautiful, rural community wearing bike helmets to ward off the crow dive bombing them in the backyard. I mean, it's just hard to get that picture out of your mind. But, you mentioned somebody hanging up on you. I mean, this reporting was not without hurdles. This was not easy reporting. One, as I mentioned, the town of Williams is several hours drive south of our newsroom. And two, you were dealing with sometimes reluctant sources. So how did you tackle it? How did you approach the reporting here?
I just tried to be sympathetic to all the views that people had about this crow. Jenial loved that bird. Two of her neighbors absolutely hated it. I really do see all sides on this. If a crow is, dive bombing your kids, I can completely understand how you'd react to that. I also just had to be really persistent because people didn't want to talk about this. It was kind of a neighborhood drama. So you just kind of go back to that shoe leather sort of journalism, and you're just calling up people, cold calling them and knocking on doors and following leads. You can't shy away from potential confrontation. But that's sort of the job sometimes.
I think one of your tapes, you say, I'm here writing about the crow. Somebody said, still?
Yeah.
So what do you think this story says about humans and our need to anthropomorphize animals, make them into little humans and give them personality traits and name them and, consider them parts of our family? I mean, what does it say about the human condition?
One of the things that I thought was super interesting is that the people who loved Cosmo would say, oh, he loves to play with kids. He loves to swoop down and chase and play with them. And then the people who hated Cosmo would say, oh, he hated kids. He would swoop down and attack them. And they're describing the exact same thing that the bird was doing, but they were perceiving it very differently. And I think it was interesting that people were assigning motives to the bird, which crows are really smart. So I don't know what Cosmo was actually thinking, but it's interesting how we assign motives to animals. And we do that with people too, right? Like, this is how we make sense of the world. I think that this is a human trait, is that we try to assign motives to other people or animals. And I think oftentimes we are wrong about those assumptions. But maybe that's the human condition element. People were like, the bird was evil and the bird was a jerk. People used profane words to describe the bird to me, and people describe other people in that way. And it's often not quite the case.
And not to give away too much, because the series is there available. I'll link to it from the episode notes. But at one point, a couple people got so fed up with the bird that they disappeared him for a bit.
Yeah. So it turns out that Cosmo disappeared before his big school appearance. And in talking with the neighbors, repeatedly kind of got them to admit that they had actually taken Cosmo before, captured him, brought him to a wildlife rehabilitation center, which there was some kind of miscommunication because the center thought the bird was injured. And really what the bird's problem is that he was just kind of a jerk to these neighbors. And so they ended up releasing the crow, and that is how he ended up at the school. So there was just sort of an interesting backstory about this crow. I thought it was interesting. Maybe, I don't know if other people thought it was interesting.
Well, tell me a little bit about reader reaction, or viewer reaction, maybe I should say, to the series.
So initially we had conceived this as a podcast, and I was thinking in my mind this would be like Serial, but sillier. And we did have a podcast company that was interested for a while, which is part of why this whole process got drawn out a little bit longer and, took a couple of years. But when that didn't pan out, we decided to try something new and reach like a younger audience where this kind of explanatory episodic content does well. And that was on TikTok and YouTube. And so on those platforms, which it was intended for, I think the feedback has been really positive. I think people understand the journey that we were going on together. I would say that some readers of OregonLive are maybe folks who probably aren't on TikTok. I'm not sure that they necessarily got it. I did get a few snarky emails from people who thought I needed to find something better to do with my time. But, we're a modern media company and we try to find new platforms to reach new audiences, and those audiences aren't all the same and don't all like the same thing, and that's okay.
Yeah, so TikTok being very popular with people under 35, specializes in short videos. We say a 12-part series, but this was not like 12 open pages in the newspaper. This was not an hour-long commitment of people's time. These averaged what in length? About
Oh yeah, like 3 to 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Like 5 minutes was the longest. So they're just little snippets to kind of keep you kind of going along the journey. Again, I was trying to serialize it in the sense that I'm trying to find this bird and you were with me as we were trying to figure out what happened.
And from a storytelling perspective, Sam, I mean, did the fact that at the end of the day you didn't have a concrete answer, I mean, did that give you pause in terms of just how to tell the story?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I was really worried about that. But I also kept thinking that I would get an answer. Like, even as we were doing the final edits of the video, I was still reaching out to people and making phone calls and chasing leads. I am eternally optimistic about this. I still think somebody knows what happened, and I think maybe they'll talk. I'm still like waiting for the jinx moment where we will get a confession. But I did figure that even if we didn't have an answer, I listen to a lot of true crime where they don't always serve up a killer at the end. And I think people are still intrigued by the mystery and are along for the journey.
And tell me a little bit more about Williams. I mean, I think like most readers probably haven't visited Williams. It's a little off the beaten path. So talk a little bit about the small town. And then, I wanted to hear a little more about your background, because I know you've reported quite a bit in small towns before joining the Oregonian.
Yeah. I was only working in like very rural small towns before I joined the Oregonian. Williams, however, is, I would say, unlike any of the places that I lived. It's way quirkier. It is located between Grants Pass and Medford in the Applegate Valley, which is deep southern Oregon. And I have spent a lot of time in rural areas. So I feel like I can kind of speak small town, but what surprises me about Williams is that there's like way more hippies than any other small town I've lived in. Like, there are real kind of new age, like literal communes, very people who hold maybe fringe beliefs kind of go to a place like Williams to get away or to just sort of, I don't know, live their life unencumbered by others. It's a very cool and weird place.
It's kind of a strong theme in Oregon, kind of live and let live, and a little bit of, to each his own. And Williams, it sounded like pretty big plots of land. It's not like people are right up against each other, but they're neighbors, but it's not like suburbia.
Yeah, they're neighbors in the sense that they have property that adjoins, but not in the sense that you could necessarily see your neighbor's house.
Yeah, and lots of wildlife. And you talked about this in the series that, certainly the people who work in wildlife management don't appreciate habituating or feeding wild animals. And then there are people who have big hearts and might see a bird or an animal they think needs help and try to help. And it's a bit of a cultural divide there too, as well.
I also think, some of this has to do with, resources. I mean, are you able to, not everybody knows you're supposed to contact a wildlife handling professional to do all these things. And when you're out in the middle of nowhere, like, that's not really the first thing that's going to come to your mind. There were a lot of people, like, the interactions that we have with animals was a recurring theme with a lot of people that I talked to. There was a person who is not a vet, but does a lot of sort of clandestine veterinary care for people in this area. And there are a couple of different ways to look at this, right? This is a divisive topic, because some people say you need to be licensed to do this, and other people say, well, I don't have the money to go to a vet, and there is no other vet, and this is better than nothing. And it was really interesting to talk to people and hear their different perspectives about how we should be interacting with animals.
Yeah, some people have a very strict, I mean, they won't even put out a salt lick for deer, and other people will feed the raccoons off the back deck. And, and then sometimes you have a bear in Southern Oregon that gets a bit too comfortable around humans, breaking into cars or what have you. And so it can go badly quickly, I guess. So going back to some of the reader reaction you were saying, and I got just a little tiny bit of it too. It's like, hey, there's homelessness, there's wars going on, there's drug addiction. Why aren't you reporting on those? And I, of course, say, well, it's not an either or. Of course, we are reporting on all of those. But talk about, what is the role of this kind of story in terms of the media diet that we offer people?
I hope the newspaper isn't just a constant barrage of horrible stuff that goes wrong in the world. And that is a part of what a newspaper is, for sure. But if you ask people why they don't read the news, a lot of them will tell you because it's depressing and it's upsetting and they feel powerless about it. And why would I pay money just to be extra bummed out about something to read that every morning? And I do think you need to be informed to be a good citizen, but sometimes you can ponder the big questions of life by learning about a crow and about a bird that has affected a lot of people. And in defense of feature writing, which is what a lot of what I do, I think Cosmo's story is a little bit different than the kind of stories I normally write. I would say that it's totally okay. And in fact, I think it's pretty vital that you remind yourself that there is joy in the world and you can give yourself time to appreciate that. And that is okay.
Well said. Yeah, people ask me about that too. Why is news so negative? And I say, well, you don't often see a headline that says thousands of planes landed safely today.
I would read that headline.
Well, after the door plug fell off, that suddenly became news. It was a headline then. But, typically it's the out of the ordinary. It's the bad thing that happens. You're right. But, newspapers have always carried comics pages and puzzles and horoscopes and human interest features and Dear Abby and all of those things that, yes, try to leaven the bad news or perhaps the dry news, not even necessarily bad news, but just perhaps less interesting. It might be something the legislature is doing or, policy decision. It might affect a lot of people, but it's a little bit dry. So we want to offer a variety of ways to engage with our content. Here is Oregon. You work for Here is Oregon. That's our channel for features. It highlights the good, the offbeat, the lighter fare, that celebrates the people and places of Oregon. When I became editor 5 years ago, I said, I wanted to do three things: have a robust daily news report, have consequential watchdog journalism, and celebrate the people in the place that we live in. And that is what Here is Oregon does so well. So what's next for you, Sam? What's on your plate?
Probably done with birds for a while. Do you want me to just tell you what stories I'm working on? I mean, right now I'm working on it's the 100th anniversary of the Portland Youth Philharmonic, which is the oldest youth philharmonic in the country. I find that very surprising. And then I am trying to travel a little bit for the Here is Oregon section and get outside of Portland. And so I'm planning to go to the Short Circuit House in Astoria, which is an Airbnb, where they filmed some of the scenes of that movie from the 80s. And then I'm planning to go down to North Bend in Coos County. And there's a theater there that is also turning 100, and they're doing a local spoof of the movie Anchorman is their next play. So I'm going to go check that out. There's lots of cool and interesting and quirky stuff that happens all over the state. Portland does not have a monopoly on weird.
Yeah, that sounds terrific. Well, we look forward to more stories. Thank you so much, Sam. And with that, we'll call it a wrap. Thanks so much for listening to Beat Check with the Oregonian. If you like this show, give us a 5-star rating and review in Apple Podcasts. It really helps people find the show. Tell a friend, help spread the word. The best way to support our journalism and stories like this one is with a subscription to OregonLive. You can do that at OregonLive.com/pod support. Until next time.